After sheltering in place for more than a month, my husband and I ventured out to the grocery store. We soon found ourselves going the wrong way down an aisle. We then got most of the items on our list, and then we realized that we had forgotten an item that was 5 or 6 aisles previous, and we couldn't figure out how to get back there without upsetting the traffic flow. So we just said, we'll buy that item next week. We went to the checkout counter, and the clerk now was separated from us by a divider, and we were all wearing masks. The mission of the grocery store adventure was to buy food for our family. However, the experience was very different than one we were used to. And I think that's the same with the way church is now. The mission is the same, but the experience is different. Each month, Rob stands up and tells us or reminds us that our teenagers are skipping church to be the church. I'm not sure any of us realized how prophetic those words would become. Now, we are all skipping church to be the church. Loving God with all your heart and soul and might, and loving your neighbor as yourself, those words I've always found very easy to say, but far harder to fulfill. If one thinks of the many interactions as humans we have in the course of a week, they are almost too numerous to count. Interactions with loved ones, with extended family, with friends, with colleagues, with church members, with neighbors, with business associates, with people in the stores. Some of those, many of those encounters are routine. Some require compassion, empathy. Others are challenging, and others are difficult. Sometimes you have an encounter with someone who has a difficult conversation to have with you, and conversely, you sometimes need to have a conversation with someone else that's difficult. The struggle that I've always had is taking me out of the center out of my being and my fragile ego and truly trying to reflect God's love and light. Today, as we find ourselves in the midst of this crisis, what I'm noticing is that far more people are attempting and reflecting God's love and light. And I think that that is being the church. I have a neighbor around the corner who has placed a large sign that says hope, and she has it lights all around it and through each letter. And to me, that is being the church. A couple little girls down the street made cookies and had flowers, and they had them wrapped in cellophane, and they delivered them to all the elderly people on the street. I wasn't sure if I should have been insulted or happy that I received one, but that is being the church. I'm a walker. I love to walk, and when I walk, I'm on a mission. I don't like to stop and talk. I just want to walk. When we first were sheltering in place, I was a few streets over, and a woman was working in her yard. This is a woman who I would consider an acquaintance. She's certainly not a friend. She's a neighbor and an acquaintance. Her husband had died this fall. And so she greeted me, and I continued to walk. And then I caught myself and I stopped. And I said, how are you doing? Do you need anything? Is there anything we can do for you? And she then went on for probably 10 or 15 minutes, simply talking about how much she missed her husband and how sheltering in place and the virus just brought back a great wealth of sadness. I basically listened, and then I moved on, and I thought to myself, I'm not sure, as a matter of fact, I am sure that I would not have stopped before the virus had struck, because I would have been focusing on cooking dinner, getting ready for my next activity. Now, I find that we have much more time to be reflective and to be trying to reflect God's light. One thing I've noticed is the way younger parents or parents with younger children are right now teaching their children. I think of the many members of the St. John's community. Some, like my son, are essential workers and have to work and also teach their children. Others are probably out of work and still have to teach their children. Others are trying to work from home and teach their children. And what I have observed and what I think is happening is that they're doing that, reflecting God's light and love with all of the stresses around them. Sometimes when I think of reflecting God's light and love, I think of it happening out there. But it also can happen right within our homes. And I think we have many members who are being the church right in their own homes. When a crisis occurs, a mass shooting or 911, I go to church, and I'm not sure if I actually think these thoughts out loud, but I go with the expectation that the word, or Ann, Nathan, and Rob's words, or the choir's music, or the music of Jen, Ashley, and Olin, that those things, as I'm sitting there in the pew, will fill the hole in my heart and in my soul. One of the new realizations for me as we go through this crisis is that we have to be more active. We're not empty vessels. I'm not an empty vessel who goes to church simply to be filled, but that I have an active role to play. I'm a mathematician, and when I think of the exponential growth of the virus, it leads me to think of what would happen if everyone, myself and everyone else in our church community, were to continue to try to reflect God's light and love, even when we get on the other side of this crisis. Will there be an exponential growth of God's love? One last thing. I think of the story of the disciples who have been fishing and they catch nothing. Jesus comes upon them and he asks them to take him out in the boat, and they do so. He then addresses the crowd. He preaches to the crowd. I shouldn't say addresses. He preaches to the crowd. He talks about the new role of the poor, about social justice and injustice. He preaches about the new world order. Then I think the disciples, when Jesus asked the disciples to lower their nets, I think that they probably thought, because this is what I would think, I think they probably thought, Lord, you stick to preaching. Let us fishing experts stick to fishing. We fished all night. The fish was supposedly right below the surface, and we didn't catch anything. Don't ask us now to put our nets in with all of these people watching. But we all know what happened. They did as they were requested, and there was an overabundance. My prayer for myself and for us as a church community is as we're going through this and when we begin to get on the other side, that the messages, the pictures that are seared in our memories of what we've been going through are not forgotten, that we don't desire and want to return to the old ways, but rather we take some of our new learnings and become a better people, a better church. To me, if we can do that and think more clearly, love more deeply, and share more willingly, there will be a lot more church in our community. Thank you.